never imagined that the brother my parents adored, the golden boy of the family, would betray me in the cruelest way possible. While I was busy building a future, trusting my wife with all my heart, they were sneaking behind my back, sharing secrets, moments, and eventually, a bed. He didn't just betray me, he got my wife pregnant. And the boy I had loved and raised, the boy I thought was mine, wasn't even my own flesh and blood. When the truth came out, it shattered everything. My parents, who had spent a lifetime defending him, finally saw him for who he truly was. They disowned him. The $2 million 0 cents inheritance that was meant to be shared, it's now mine, and he gets nothing. Today, he's broke, desperate, and crying for my help. After everything he did, after all the years of betrayal and lies, should I forgive him? This is the story of how betrayal destroyed a family, and how I found my way back to freedom. Stay with me. Growing up, I learned early that in my family, fairness was just a word, not a reality. My younger brother David was the golden child. The sun rose and set on him, while I was just there. My mother doted on him endlessly. She cooked his favorite meals, did his laundry, praised him for the smallest achievements. Meanwhile, I was expected to fend for myself. If I needed something, I was told to figure it out. If David needed something, everyone rushed to help. At first, I didn't mind. I was an independent kid, quiet, bookish, content to be alone. I thought maybe it was better this way, but as the years went on, the favoritism deepened into something uglier. David didn't just get more love. He was allowed to do whatever he pleased, including tormenting me. He mocked me relentlessly for being different. He teased me about my height, my glasses, the way I spoke. I remember one afternoon vividly. I was sitting on the living room floor, reading, when David snuck up behind me and yanked my glasses off. He tossed them across the room and laughed when they cracked against the wall. I was devastated. I had saved up my allowance for months to afford those glasses. When I ran crying to my mother, clutching the broken frames, she simply sighed and said, "Boys will be boys." He didn't mean it. Another time, David put tiny stones in my cereal. I only noticed when my spoon made a strange scraping sound. If I hadn't caught it, I could have broken a tooth or worse. When I showed my mother the bowl of stones, she just laughed. "That's how brothers bond," she said. Bonding? It felt more like slow, deliberate cruelty. Somehow, he turned into the others. Well, school wasn't an escape either. David and I attended the same school. Instead of being my protector, he aligned himself with the bullies. He would stand with them in the hallway, laughing while they shoved me into lockers or knocked my books from my hands. They called me names: nerd, loser, hairy monkey, and David joined in, sometimes leading the chant. The worst was the day he told me to kill myself. It wasn't shouted in anger or said as a joke. It was cold, calculated. "You're worthless," he said, eyes gleaming with hatred. "You should just kill yourself." I don't think anyone noticed how I stopped talking much after that, how I barely ate, how I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was right. Home was no refuge. Our father worked long hours, and when he was home, he usually sided with my mother in brushing things off. "Don't be so sensitive," they would say when I complained. One evening, things escalated to a terrifying point. David, in one of his manic moods, snuck up behind me while I was doing homework and lit a match near my hair. I smelled the burning first, felt the heat second. I leapt up, slapping at my head, panicking. Luckily, it was just the ends that singed. For once, my father took it seriously. He grabbed David by the arm so hard that my brother actually looked scared. "This isn't just playing," Dad said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. "This is dangerous. You could have killed him." That night, my father sat me down privately. He admitted he had made mistakes, that he had hoped David would grow out of his cruelty, but now he realized it was deeper than just immaturity. I told him everything: the bullying, the stealing, the insults. For the first time, someone truly listened. The next day, Dad spoke to the school principal. He also enrolled me in MMA classes at a local gym, saying, "You need to learn to stand up for yourself. I should have taught you that sooner." It was the first glimpse of hope I'd had in years. David didn't take kindly to my new strength. When he tried to steal my allowance money one day, I caught him red-handed and, without thinking, punched him square in the face. He fell back, stunned and crying. It felt good. Not because I liked hurting him. I didn't. But because for once, I wasn't powerless. Of course, my mother rushed to his side, glaring at me like I was the villain. But this time, my father intervened. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." That moment changed something inside me. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to live under David's shadow. I didn't have to accept being the family's scapegoat. I had the power to fight back, and I intended to use it. Learning MMA was the turning point. At first, stepping into the gym felt like entering another world. Loud, sweaty, filled with people who looked nothing like me. I was a scrawny, quiet kid clutching borrowed gloves, completely out of place. But what I lacked in strength, I made up for in focus. Every punch, every kick, every fall, I absorbed it all like a sponge. Training gave me something I'd never had before: confidence. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about reclaiming the power I had been taught to surrender. After a few months, my body began to change. I was no longer the skinny boy who shrank into himself. I stood taller. I spoke louder. I stopped flinching when people raised their voices. David noticed. At first he tried to provoke me, shoving me in the hallway, hurling insults, daring me to react. But I didn't react the way he wanted. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I stared him down, calm and unafraid. It rattled him. One afternoon, when he tried to steal from me again, snatching the pocket money I had saved, something inside me snapped. I demanded he give it back. He laughed in my face, mocking me like he always had, so I punched him. Hard. He stumbled back, shock written all over his face. For once, he was the one crying. For once, I was the one standing tall. Of course, my mother came rushing out, siding with David like always. But this time, my father didn't back down. Mother and I thought all that when David explained why he had taken my money. And when David whined about needing it for a date, my father's disappointment was unmistakable. "You're lucky your brother handled this himself," Dad said coldly. "If you'd stolen from anyone else, you'd be facing real consequences." David's tantrum that day was spectacular, slamming doors, screaming about how unfair life was. But I didn't feel guilty. Not this time. After that, the dynamic shifted. David stopped trying to physically intimidate me. He still muttered insults under his breath. Loser, nerd, whatever he could grasp. But it didn't land the way it used to. I had grown stronger, not just in muscle, but in spirit. Still, the damage he had done over the years left scars I didn't fully understand yet. I carried an invisible armor. Cautious, guarded, slow to trust. I realized then that real strength wasn't about throwing punches. It was about knowing when not to. It was about standing your ground, even when no one else stood with you. And as high school wore on, I became laser-focused on one goal: get out. Leave the toxic house behind. Build a life that David and my parents would have no control over. Freedom. That was the dream, and I was willing to fight for it. With everything I had, leaving home for college felt like finally breathing fresh air after years of suffocation. The scholarship I earned wasn't just about academics, it was my ticket to freedom. For the first time, I could wake up without hearing David's insults, or feeling the weight of being the outsider. I made friends, real friends, who liked me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. It was during my second year that I met Karen. She wasn't like anyone I had ever known. Bright, funny, full of life. She had a way of making everyone around her feel seen, even someone like me. We met at a small party through a mutual friend. I almost didn't go. Social gatherings still made me anxious, but something told me to take the chance. Karen struck up a conversation with me first. I remember being surprised that someone like her, confident, outgoing, would even notice someone like me. But she did, and somehow, against all odds, we clicked. What started as late-night study sessions and coffee dates turned into something deeper. She listened when I talked. She laughed at my dry jokes. She made me feel like I wasn't broken, just different. And for the first time, different didn't feel like a bad thing. Coming from a religious background, Karen believed in commitment, in building a family. When she found out she was pregnant during our final year, we were both scared, but also strangely excited. We decided to get married right after graduation. There wasn't much money, but there was love, and at the time, it felt like enough. Our wedding was small, just family and a few close friends. My parents were there, smiling proudly. Even David showed up, quieter than usual. For one brief, shining moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we could put the past behind us. I stood at the altar, watching Karen walk toward me, her eyes shining with tears. And I believed, with everything I had, that I was leaving my old life behind. The pain, the loneliness, the constant feeling of not being good enough. I thought it was over. In Karen, I thought I had found my new beginning. A home built not from obligation or fear, but from love. A future that would be different, better. If only I had known then how wrong I was. Marriage, in the beginning, was everything I had hoped for. Karen and I moved into a tiny apartment near campus. We didn't have much, just mismatched furniture and secondhand pots and pans, but we had each other. We spent late nights dreaming about the future, whispering about baby names, arguing over who would get up for midnight feedings. For a while, I truly believed we were untouchable. That love, real love, could weather anything. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, cracks began to form. Karen started staying late at work. At first, it made sense. We were both young professionals trying to build careers. I was proud of her ambition, her drive. But then there were missed calls. Those excuses that didn't quite add up. A distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I ignored the warning signs, told myself I was being paranoid. A remnant of my broken childhood, always expecting betrayal where there was none. I didn't want to be that person. I trusted her. I had to. Then, one night, I found her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. A message popped up from a contact labeled simply, "James, can't wait to see you again tonight. Last time was amazing." My hands shook. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the words that didn't make sense, that couldn't make sense. I told myself it was probably innocent, maybe a coworker, a friend, maybe an inside joke. But deep down, I knew. When Karen came out of the bathroom, smiling, wrapped in a towel, I couldn't pretend. I asked her, bluntly, desperately, if there was something she needed to tell me. At first she played dumb, laughed it off. But when I showed her the message, the laughter died. The confession came out in pieces. Tears, apologies, promises. It was a mistake. She had been feeling stressed, lonely, overwhelmed with new motherhood, and James, her married coworker, had been there for her in a way she claimed I hadn't been. The pain was immediate, sharp, blinding. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the lies. The betrayal of the life we were building together. The violation of the one safe space I thought I had. I packed a bag that night and left. I sat in my car in the parking lot for hours, staring blankly ahead, trying to figure out when exactly everything had started to fall apart. Trying to figure out who I was, if even my marriage had been built on lies. Friends urged me to leave her. Some said once a cheater, always a cheater. Others said to fight for the family we had started. In the end, it wasn't anger that brought me back. It was fear. Fear of raising my son in a broken home. Fear that if I walked away, I would be no better than the family I had left behind. Fear that maybe, just maybe, we could fix it. Karen promised it was over. She promised she loved me. She begged for another chance. And like a fool, desperate to believe in happy endings, I gave it to her. We agreed to start counseling. We made new promises. We painted over the cracks and called it healing. For a while, it even felt real. I told myself we were stronger now, that surviving betrayal had made our marriage unbreakable. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to believe that. But some wounds don't heal cleanly. Some fester in the dark, waiting for the right moment to tear open again. And deep down, beneath all the forgiveness and the fresh starts, a small voice whispered, "It's not over." For a few years after the first affair, life settled into something almost resembling normal. Karen and I focused on our son, trying to build the life we had once dreamed about. We went to birthday parties, soccer games, neighborhood barbecues. We took family photos where we all wore matching sweaters, smiling like the betrayal had never happened. But sometimes I even believed it myself, that maybe we were stronger now. Maybe surviving the storm had made us unbreakable. But deep down, I think I always knew. Some wounds don't heal, they just scab over, waiting for the right moment to bleed again. 3 months ago, the bleeding started. It was a Sunday afternoon. Karen sat across from me at the kitchen table, nervously twisting her wedding ring. Henry was upstairs, probably building Lego castles, blissfully unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I glanced up, half distracted. I thought it was another minor confession, a secret shopping spree, a forgotten appointment. We were years past the big betrayals, right? "There's a chance that Henry isn't yours," she said. The words hit like a sledgehammer. I stared at her, uncomprehending. Surely I had heard wrong. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice strangely calm. Karen broke down sobbing, the words tumbling out between gasps for air. She confessed to sleeping with someone else around the time Henry was conceived. But not just someone else. David, my brother. The air left my lungs. I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself not to fall apart. "You slept with David?" I said, barely able to choke the words out. She nodded miserably. "One night," she said. "It was a mistake. She had been vulnerable, he had been there. She didn't know how it happened." But the cracks in her story quickly showed. It hadn't been just once. They had kept in touch, sneaking around behind my back for years. Half of her business trips, they weren't business at all. They were hotel rooms. Stolen weekends, whispered lies. Every memory I thought was safe twisted in my mind, poisoned. The family holidays, the lazy Sunday mornings, the promises whispered under the covers. All of it, fake. I sat there, listening, numb. My hands trembled. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear her apologies. I felt like I was trapped underwater, screaming silently while the world went on above me. Karen reached out across the table, desperate to touch me, to pull me back. I flinched away. "Why?" I croaked. "Why him?" She couldn't answer, or maybe she didn't want to. Her excuses blurred together. Loneliness, weakness, a stupid mistake that spiraled out of control. She begged me to forgive her. She said Henry needed me. She said I was a wonderful father, better than David could ever be. But the words sounded hollow, empty, like trying to glue together a shattered vase. I packed a bag that night, silent, mechanical. Karen cried on the doorstep, clutching our son to her chest, pleading with me to stay. "Do it for him," she sobbed. I kissed Henry on the forehead, a kiss that broke something inside me, and walked away. The next morning, I drove straight to my parents' house. I had to tell them, not just for me, but because they needed to know the truth about their precious golden boy. When I told them, the reaction was immediate. My father's face hardened into stone. My mother gasped, covering her mouth like she could physically shove the truth back inside. At first, she refused to believe it. David would never, she started, but her voice faltered when she saw the raw devastation on my face. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I simply told them everything. The affair, the paternity doubts, the years of betrayal. To erase any lingering doubt, I called David right then and there, putting the call on speaker. He answered cheerfully at first, as if nothing was wrong. But when I calmly confronted him, the panic crept into his voice. At first, he denied it all. Then, when I said Karen had confessed everything, his defenses crumbled. He started blaming her, blaming me, blaming everyone but himself. My father listened, silent and grim. Then he took the phone from me and spoke, his voice colder than I had ever heard. "You are no son of mine." David went quiet. Then he started begging, apologizing, crying, but it didn't matter. The golden child had fallen from grace, and there would be no saving him this time. That night, my parents made their decision. David was disowned, cut off from the college funds, the inheritance, the family home, every connection severed. The next step was a DNA test. Even though part of me already knew, I needed the cold clinical truth. A few weeks later, the results arrived. David, 99.9% probability. I sat alone in my empty apartment, staring at the paper until the words blurred. I wept. Not for Karen, not even for David, but for Henry, the boy I loved more than life itself, who was now a daily reminder of betrayal. Karen continued to call, to text, to show up at my door. She promised she would change. She swore she would spend the rest of her life making it right. But forgiveness isn't something you can demand, and love, real love, doesn't survive in soil poisoned by betrayal. I filed for divorce, and this time when I walked away, I didn't look back. Filing for divorce felt less like an end and more like a beginning. A painful, brutal beginning, yes, but one where, for the first time in years, I was choosing myself. Karen fought the divorce bitterly. She cried in court, painted herself as the repentant wife, the desperate mother trying to keep her family together. She demanded alimony, citing the income gap between us. She insisted that for the sake of Henry, we should try counseling again. But the affair, especially with my own brother, weighed heavily in my favor. The judge saw right through her theatrics. Her requests were denied. The custody agreements were simple. Henry would stay with her. I didn't fight for visitation rights. I couldn't. Every time I looked at Henry, I saw David's face staring back. It wasn't Henry's fault. I knew that logically. But emotionally, I was broken. Letting go of Henry nearly destroyed me. But holding on to a lie would have destroyed me even faster. Meanwhile, David tried to salvage what little was left of his life. He showed up at my parents' house, begging for forgiveness, crying on the front porch like he was still a little boy, hoping Mommy and Daddy would fix everything. My mother, ever the enabler, wavered. I could see it, the way her hands trembled, the way her voice cracked when she said, "Maybe we should hear him out." But my father stood firm. He looked David in the eye and said the words that closed the door forever. "You made your choices. Now live with them." David wasn't just cut off emotionally. He was cut off financially, too. The college fund? Gone. The inheritance? Gone. Every lifeline he had counted on snapped. My father even updated his will, leaving David exactly $1 to prevent any legal contests. Everything else, the house, the investments, the retirement accounts, would go to me. On one condition: if my father passed away first, my mother would have the right to live in the house for the rest of her life. I agreed without hesitation. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and somewhere deep down, I knew she carried her own share of guilt, David found out about the will change within days thanks to my mother's conflicted heart. She tried to keep it from me, but guilt eventually cracked her resolve. When I confronted her, she broke down crying, apologizing for still seeing David as her baby boy. My father stood beside me, silent but resolute, his presence alone reminding her where the line was drawn. He told her bluntly, "If you ever contact him behind our backs again, you won't be living here anymore." That threat, heavy and real, silenced her. David, realizing he had no more cards to play, called me one last time. He begged, he raged, he cried, he blamed Karen, he blamed me, he blamed everyone but himself. I listened to him cry, my once proud, arrogant brother, and felt nothing. No rage, no pity, just a hollow, final silence. "You're not my brother anymore," I said. "Don't ever contact me again." And I hung up. For the first time in my life, I was free. Not just from David, not just from Karen, but from the person they had spent years convincing me I was. Weak, unworthy, easy to break. They were wrong. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding, stronger, sharper, unforgiving. And I would never let anyone tear me down again. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, the phone rang again. It was David. I almost didn't answer. Part of me knew nothing good could come from hearing his voice. But some stubborn curiosity, or maybe some lingering sense of closure, made me pick up. His voice was different this time. Gone was the cocky, arrogant younger brother I had grown up hating. In his place was a man broken by his own choices. He told me he was struggling, that after being cut off, after Karen demanded child support, after losing everything, he had nothing left. He said he couldn't afford college anymore. He was working part-time as a mechanic, barely making enough to survive. Karen was pressuring him, threatening legal action if he didn't pay. He said he needed help, that he couldn't do it alone, that he was sorry. For a moment I felt that old ache, the instinct to help, to fix, to be the brother I'd always wished he would be. But it passed, like a cloud clearing from the sun. "You made your bed," I said quietly. "Now lie in it." He tried to argue, said Karen had manipulated him, said I was being unfair, that family was supposed to forgive. I let him rant, let him cry, let him beg, and then, calmly, without anger, I ended it. "You're not my family anymore," I said. "Don't call me again." I hung up. For a long moment, I sat there, phone still in hand, staring at the wall, listening to the silence that followed, feeling its weight. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit, but it also felt clean, like closing a book that had been poisoning me for years. David was no longer my responsibility. His mistakes, his downfall, they were his alone now. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what true freedom felt like. Freedom wasn't an instant explosion. It wasn't some grand moment where the pain just vanished and happiness rushed in to take its place. It was slower than that. Quieter. More like learning how to breathe again after nearly drowning. After cutting ties with David and finalizing the divorce with Karen, I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much. A modest one-bedroom with creaky floors and peeling paint. But it was mine. Every square foot of it belonged to no one but me. No betrayals, no lies, no ghosts of a life that had fallen apart. The first few weeks were hard. There were nights when the loneliness wrapped around me like a second skin. When I would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering if I had made a mistake. If maybe forgiving, forgetting, pretending would have been easier. But then there were mornings. Mornings when sunlight streamed through the windows and I realized I could breathe. No tightness in my chest, no gnawing anxiety about where Karen was or who she was. I started finding small joys again, cooking meals for myself, going for long walks without checking my phone every 10 minutes, reading books I had abandoned years ago, spending hours at the gym, feeling my body grow stronger in ways that went far beyond muscle. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, joined a local hiking club, took weekend trips just because I could. I even started seeing a therapist, something I once would have seen as a sign of weakness. Now, I saw it for what it truly was, an act of strength, acknowledging that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about learning how to live with it, learning how to build something beautiful from the rubble. Henry stayed with Karen. I didn't fight that decision. It wasn't his fault. But I knew I wasn't ready to be part of his life, not while the wounds were still so fresh. Maybe one day, when enough time has passed, maybe when I've forgiven myself for walking away, I'll find a way back to him. But for now, I needed distance. My parents and I grew closer. My father, once a distant figure in my life, became someone I could call just to talk. We played golf on weekends. We argued over politics. We laughed. Real laughter, not the strained, careful kind that used to fill our house. Even my mother, despite everything, tried. She apologized in her own quiet, stumbling way. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe her. Maybe people really could change. Maybe forgiveness didn't have to mean forgetting. Maybe it just meant choosing to move forward. Today, my life isn't perfect. There are scars that will never fully fade, regrets that sometimes creep into my mind when the nights get too quiet. But I'm not the scared, broken boy I used to be. I'm stronger, wiser, and free. If you had told me back then, when I stood at the altar believing in forever, or when I held my newborn son thinking he was mine, that one day I would lose everything and still be okay, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am, still standing, still breathing, still living. And somehow, that's enough. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal, no matter how devastating, does not have to define you. You are more than the people who broke you. You are stronger than the ones who tried to tear you down. Yes, heartbreak can shatter you. Yes, losing everything you thought was certain can leave you gasping for air. But healing is possible. Freedom is possible. A new life, one you build with your own hands, on your own terms, is waiting for you. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small steps. A meal cooked for yourself. A night spent sleeping without nightmares. A morning where the sunlight doesn't hurt anymore. You don't have to forgive those who hurt you to move forward. You don't have to carry the weight of their sins on your shoulders. You can let go. You can choose yourself. You can choose peace. And when you do, you'll realize something incredible. You were never broken. You were only bending, making space inside yourself for something better to grow. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope in some way it reminds you that even after the worst betrayals, there is still life waiting for you. Still love, still hope, still you.